The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes just before midnight when everyone's finally settled in for the night. Well, almost everyone. The young woman in her room, sprawled out on her bed, was glued to her phone screen, mindlessly scrolling through social media. She was just about to close the app when she heard the familiar, soft thudding of footsteps from down the hall. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was just her imagination, but the sound came closer. It was unmistakable, her dad, sneaking around, probably plotting one of his ridiculous pranks. Her dad was infamous for his pranks, and this one had been building for days. She'd heard him talking about how, this time, it would be different, and how he was going to pull off the prank of the century. What was worse was that she was never safe. He'd been known to disguise himself as a burglar, or pretend to be a ghost, scaring her half to death only to reveal it was just him with a mask on. The last time, he'd even wrapped her entire bed in plastic wrap while she was out shopping, and when she got home, it was too late, she had to sleep on the floor. Tonight, though, she was ready. She was onto him. She had been keeping an eye on his every move all day, making sure he didn't have any weird gadgets or costumes stashed away. There was no way she was going to let him catch her off guard this time. She wasn't going to scream, she wasn't going to jump out of her skin. She was going to play it cool and let him know she wasn't going to fall for it again. As she sat there, waiting, she couldn't help but chuckle to herself. She had a feeling her dad's prank this time was going to be even more ridiculous than usual, something she would be able to laugh about for months. She had no idea just how ridiculous it was going to get. The footsteps grew louder, and she heard the faint sound of the door creaking open. Her heart rate didn't spike. She didn't panic. Instead, she rolled her eyes, tossed her phone aside, and pulled the covers up to her chin, pretending to be asleep. She was ready for it. But when the door opened, the figure that entered wasn't what she expected. There he was, her dad, wearing a full-on disguise, looking like a poorly executed version of a spy, holding a flashlight that was turned off. He was crouching low, trying to sneak in without making a sound, but it wasn't working. His knees creaked as he moved, and he made a soft sh sound, which only made it worse. She could hear him muttering to himself about how he was going to get her good this time. She smirked. He was trying so hard to keep the suspense, but she wasn't impressed. He probably thought she hadn't heard him creeping around. What a fool. Dad, seriously? You're going to try this again? She said, her voice deadpan. His head snapped up like he'd just been caught in the act, but instead of looking sheepish or embarrassed, he simply smiled and shook his head. What are you talking about? He stammered. I wasn't sneaking around, I was, just checking on you. Right, just checking on me, in the middle of the night, wearing that, she said, gesturing toward his ridiculous outfit, a black hoodie, dark sunglasses, and a fake mustache. I mean, really, Dad? Her dad froze, realizing his cover was blown. For a second, he looked genuinely surprised. But then, as usual, he tried to play it off. No, you got it all wrong, he said, stepping further into the room. This is just, an undercover mission. I'm, from the future, sent to protect you from an alien invasion. Very serious business, you know? She raised an eyebrow. Sure, Dad. And I'm the Queen of England. Maybe next time, you can go with a cape or something, really sell the whole superhero vibe. Her dad didn't miss a beat. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a rubber mask, and slapped it onto his face. The mask was a hideous face of a grinning, exaggerated alien. He was fully committed to this ridiculous prank. You see? He said, holding the mask in front of her face. I've come to save you from the impending doom of extraterrestrial invaders. They'll never know what hit em. She stared at him for a moment, wondering how in the world this was his idea of a good prank. She'd seen him do some truly bizarre things, but this was a new level of absurd. She couldn't help but laugh. Dad, are you serious? You can't possibly think this is going to work. I saw the mask in the closet this afternoon. Her dad's face fell for a second. The look of disappointment was enough to make her feel guilty. Almost. But then he put the mask down and sighed dramatically. Okay, maybe it's not the best prank, he admitted. But you have to admit, it was a good try. A good try? You basically walked into my room dressed like a clown, she shot back, laughing even harder. Come on, you can do better than this. If you want to prank me, at least go all out. I mean, what's the point if you're just going to wear some cheap rubber mask? Her dad grinned sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, I was going to get the full costume, but the store was closed. And I didn't want to leave the house, 'cause you know, aliens might attack any minute. Sure, Dad, sure, she said, rolling her eyes. Well, you're going to have to do better than this if you want to outprank me. I'm ready for whatever you throw my way. Her dad looked at her with a mischievous gleam in his eye. Oh, trust me, kiddo. I'm not done yet. Not by a long shot. The moment her dad said he wasn't done, she knew she was in trouble. He had that look in his eyes, the kind that said he was planning something bigger and dumber than ever before. She had no idea how far he would go, but she was sure this prank was going to be one for the books. Still, she wasn't worried. In fact, she was excited. She had been preparing for this moment all day. It was time for her to turn the tables. Her dad backed away slowly, clearly trying to keep the prank suspenseful. He did a mock salute, clearly pretending to be some kind of secret agent. You might have won this round, but there's more to come, he said in his best dramatic voice. I'll be back. He stepped out of the room and closed the door behind him, leaving her alone in the quiet room. For a moment, she just lay there, staring at the door, thinking about what she was going to do next. She didn't want to just play along like she usually did. No, this time, she was going to up the ante. He had no idea what was about to hit him. She reached for her phone and texted her best friend, asking for ideas. Within seconds, she had a plan. It was perfect, it was devious, and it was going to make her dad regret ever trying to prank her again. She got up, grabbed the bag of fake blood she had hidden in her closet, and set to work. The next few minutes were a blur of action as she arranged everything just right. The first part of the plan was easy. She spread a small amount of fake blood across her bed, making it look like someone, had bled there. A subtle touch here and there made it seem convincing enough. The room didn't need to look like a crime scene, just enough to make her dad second-guess what he was seeing. Then, she heard the familiar sound of her dad's footsteps returning. He wasn't going to see this coming. He knocked before entering, which was another thing she found amusing. He knew he was about to walk into something bizarre, but he still tried to keep it normal. She didn't say anything as he entered, instead continuing to pretend that she was asleep, her back facing the door. She could hear him creeping closer, trying to sneak up on her again. This time, however, she wasn't going to just wake up, startled. Oh no. She had planned something much better. She waited until he was close enough and then made a quick, dramatic gasp, turning around with wide eyes. Her dad froze when he saw the blood. His face went pale, and she could tell he was trying to process what he was seeing. She let the tension hang for a moment, then pushed him a little further into the joke by gasping again, and clutching her throat as if something terrible had happened. Dad! She exclaimed, her voice dripping with mock horror. Something happened to me. Someone was in here. She let her words trail off, making it sound like she was in a state of shock. Her dad's eyes widened as he stepped closer, clearly unsure if this was part of the prank, or if he was witnessing a real emergency. What happened? He stammered. What's going on? Are you okay? Look at the bed, she shouted, her voice cracking as if she was about to lose it. There's blood everywhere. I don't know what happened. She paused dramatically, just long enough to see his face register complete panic. I think I need to call the police, he blurted out, rushing toward her phone. She had to stifle a laugh, knowing she had him exactly where she wanted him. His hands were shaking, and she could see the look of genuine concern in his eyes. No, No, don't call anyone, she said quickly, sitting up in bed and wiping away the fake blood with her sleeve. It's just ketchup. It's all fake. Her dad stopped mid-motion, staring at her in disbelief. What? He asked, completely thrown off. What do you mean? It's ketchup? She nodded, and as she leaned over to show him the bottle hidden under her pillow, he took a moment to process what had just happened. The tension in his face melted into confusion, which quickly turned to frustration. Seriously? He said, a little too loudly. You're pranking me now? He stopped, rubbing his temples. You really got me with that one, didn't you? She could hardly contain her laughter. She'd gotten him good. Her dad, the prank king, had fallen for her fake blood. Of course, she wasn't done yet. This was just the first step. She knew her dad wasn't the type to just give up. He'd want revenge, and she was more than happy to give it to him. He stood there for a few more moments, looking at her with a mix of disbelief and admiration. She was waiting for him to do something else, anything, but then he just sighed and shook his head. You know, he said, stepping back toward the door. I really thought I could get you with the alien thing. But you know what? You've got more tricks up your sleeve than I thought. She raised an eyebrow, keeping her face neutral. What do you mean? He smirked. You got me, kiddo. But don't think for a second that I'm done. You'll regret this. Bring it on, she said, crossing her arms. I've got plenty more where that came from. As he left the room, she couldn't help but feel a little smug. She had won the first round, but she knew the game wasn't over yet. This prank war was far from finished. The next morning, she woke up to the sound of her dad's voice booming from downstairs. He was talking to someone, probably trying to explain how he had been outwitted by his daughter. She couldn't help but smile. Last night's prank had been a success, but she knew he wasn't one to back down easily. In fact, she was already preparing herself for his retaliation. Her dad was a force to be reckoned with when it came to pranks, but this time, she was going to be one step ahead. She got up, quickly checked her phone, and found a new text from her best friend. It was a list of prank ideas that would completely throw her dad off balance. She didn't need to use all of them, just one would do. She already knew the perfect one. This time, she wasn't going to fake an injury. She was going to fake an emotional breakdown. It was going to be the perfect setup for his over-the-top response. She got dressed, making sure to look completely normal, but inside she was mentally preparing for what was about to happen. The house was quiet again, with no signs of her dad. He had clearly taken the night to regroup, but she knew it wouldn't last long. She could feel his eyes lurking, waiting for an opportunity to strike back. She had to be ready. Her dad walked into the kitchen a few minutes later, trying to act as if nothing had happened. She casually glanced over at him as he made himself a cup of coffee, pretending to be engrossed in whatever he was doing. But her mind was already on the next step of her plan. She had to make it look real, make it believable enough that he wouldn't see through it. She knew her dad all too well. If he suspected something was off, he'd ruin the prank immediately. Finally, she decided it was time. She walked into the living room, took a deep breath, and collapsed onto the couch. Her body went slack, and she let out a loud, exaggerated sob. She wasn't crying for real, of course, but it didn't matter. The moment she started, her dad rushed over, clearly startled. "What's wrong? What happened?" he asked, his voice a mix of concern and panic. She sniffled dramatically, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice quivering. "I just can't take it. Everything's falling apart." Her dad looked confused, unsure if he was witnessing a real breakdown or if it was another one of her pranks. She could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out if he should comfort her or if this was part of the game. But she wasn't going to give him an easy out. She kept going, speaking in a shaky voice, almost like she was losing control. "I'm just so overwhelmed," she continued. "I don't know what to do. I can't even think straight anymore. I'm just exhausted." Her dad leaned closer, looking even more bewildered. He wasn't sure if he should give her a hug or call for help. He glanced around, as if hoping someone would tell him what to do. She kept the sobs going, waiting for him to react. She was ready for whatever came next. "Sweetheart, please," he said softly, his voice full of concern. "You've got to tell me what's going on. Is it school? Is it work? What's going on?" She shook her head, trying to keep her face from breaking into a grin. "No, it's everything," she said, her voice cracking. "I can't handle the pressure anymore. I'm just so stressed out, and I feel like I'm failing at everything. I don't know what to do. I feel so alone." Her dad's face softened with genuine worry. He was clearly trying to figure out what was really going on. The concern in his eyes was real, and it made her feel just a little guilty for playing on his emotions. But then she remembered the pranks from last night, and how she had already gotten him good. This was just payback, after all. He sat down beside her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. Hey, he said gently. "I know things can be tough sometimes, but you're not alone. You've got me, and you've got your family. We'll figure this out together, okay?" She nodded, but inside she was struggling to keep her composure. Her dad was so good at being supportive, so genuine in his concern. She had to keep going, though. She had to make this prank complete. "It's just everything," she repeated, her voice still shaking. "I don't know how to handle it all. I just want to scream sometimes. I don't know if I can keep going." Her dad sighed, shaking his head. "Listen, I know it feels overwhelming right now, but you've got this. You're strong. You always have been." She wiped her eyes again, sniffing, and then looked up at him with a small, fake smile. "Thanks, Dad. You always know what to say." Her dad seemed to relax a little. He wasn't completely convinced, but he was starting to believe that his daughter was genuinely upset. He didn't notice the slight smirk on her face as she continued to cry into his shoulder. She almost felt bad for him. Almost. He had no idea what was coming next. Just as she was about to turn the prank in another direction, her dad stood up, still looking concerned. "I think I need to go grab some things from the store. Maybe some fresh air will do you some good," he said. "Do you want to come with me? We could grab a coffee." She paused for a second, letting him think she was considering it. Then, with the most dramatic sigh she could muster, she shook her head. "I can't. I think I need some time alone." Her dad nodded, though he still seemed unsure about leaving her alone. "Okay, but just know that I'm here for you. Whenever you're ready, just let me know, all right?" She smiled sweetly, making sure he didn't notice the twinkle in her eye. "Thanks, Dad. You're the best." As he walked out the door, she couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. She had him completely fooled. This was going to be the perfect setup for her next move. Now, it was time to get ready for the final act. It didn't take long for her dad to leave. She could hear his footsteps as he walked out the door, presumably off to the store to give her some space. She could barely hold back her laughter. He was completely falling for it. The emotional breakdown, the tears, the helplessness, all of it. He probably thought he was being a good father by giving her some time alone, but she knew better. This was just another part of her plan. Her dad was walking right into the next phase of her prank. She quickly wiped away any remaining traces of fake tears and grabbed her phone. She sent another text to her best friend, letting her know that the first phase of the prank had gone off without a hitch. But the real fun was about to begin. She had planned something even more ridiculous, something that would push her dad over the edge. It was time to get creative. First, she went into the kitchen and grabbed the loudest, most obnoxious alarm clock she could find. The kind that had a buzzing sound so sharp, it would make even the most patient person lose their mind. She set it up in the living room, hiding it behind some cushions on the couch. She wanted him to walk right into it, confused and disoriented, but she wasn't going to let him think it was a simple prank. No, she had a few more tricks up her sleeve. With the alarm clock in place, she moved on to her next step, the phone call. She dialed a number she had memorized, making sure to set her voice as shaky as possible. When the person on the other end picked up, she immediately went into character. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I don't know what to do. My dad's gone insane, and I don't know how to stop him. He's been acting weird lately, and I'm really scared," she said, her voice laced with panic. The other person on the line sounded confused but listened as she rambled on, giving just enough detail to make it sound real. She wanted to make sure her dad thought she had been on the phone with someone, creating the illusion that things were truly getting out of control. She ended the call abruptly, letting her dad think that she was on the verge of losing it. Then, it was time to wait. She sat on the couch, replaying her conversation in her head, and wondering how long it would take for him to come back home. The clock seemed to slow as her mind raced with ideas for her final move. She needed to push him just a little further. She could already hear his footsteps approaching the front door, and she could feel the excitement building inside her. Her dad entered the house with his usual confident stride, but today, there was something different. His usual prankster attitude was replaced with a genuine concern. He could sense something was wrong, and that only made her prank even sweeter. As he entered the living room, he froze, spotting the hidden alarm clock. The obnoxious buzzing sound filled the air, making him jump in surprise. "What in the world?" he started, but he didn't get far before he was interrupted by the shrill noise. Her dad tried to silence the clock, fumbling around the couch cushions, but the noise only grew louder. He wasn't expecting this kind of chaos. Her plan had worked. He was confused and overwhelmed, just as she had hoped. She watched him struggle with a grin on her face, barely able to contain her laughter. "Dad," she said, still trying to hold it together. "Dad, are you okay? What's going on?" He finally managed to pull the clock out from behind the couch and, with an exaggerated grunt, turned it off. He stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, his face a mix of frustration and disbelief. "What the hell is this?" he asked, his voice a little louder than usual. She stared at him with an innocent expression, playing the part of the concerned daughter. "What do you mean? It was just the alarm clock. I don't know how it got there." He gave her an incredulous look. "I can't believe you did that. After everything, this is your big revenge?" She barely contained her laughter, trying to look serious. "What do you mean? I was just waiting for you to come back. I didn't know what to do." Her dad took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "You've got me, kid. I admit it. But I swear to God, I'm going to get you back for this one." She smiled sweetly. "Oh, I'm sure you will. But don't think it's going to be easy." Her dad narrowed his eyes, clearly plotting his next move, but she knew it was only a matter of time before he realized he had no chance of winning this war. She had him right where she wanted him, completely out of ideas and falling for every trick she pulled. This was the beauty of the prank war. The stakes kept getting higher, but no one could ever predict what would come next. As he sat down, trying to compose himself, she took a deep breath, feeling a sense of victory wash over her. Her dad was clearly rattled, and it was only a matter of time before he came up with something equally ridiculous in response. But for now, she had won the battle. She had successfully turned the tables, getting him to fall for everything she set up. It was only a matter of time before the next round of pranks started, but for now, she was enjoying the sweet taste of victory. And as for her dad? Well, he might have thought he was the master of pranks, but she was the one who had the last laugh.